Now we'll talk about specific scenarios that might be applicable to you and what you can do when it comes to negotiation to optimize that particular situation. So first off, negotiating your current salary. So the idea here is that you are working a job and you don't really want to leave, but you also feel like you could be getting paid more. First thing to comment on is that negotiating your current compensation is going to be harder. A lot of the opportunity to have leverage and negotiate when you're going into a new job is to talk about potential. I'm going to come in, I'm going to save a bunch of money for the company, I'm going to make the company a bunch more money, I'm going to grow the number of users. There's a lot of things you could sell on the promise of what might happen. But when you're working at a company, you can't sell on potential anymore. You have to sell based off of actual data and results that you've delivered. And that, I think, can be a little bit harder because you can go crazy with the imagination on how well you might be able to do, but it's harder to have that be harder to be as excited about the backward looking instead of forward looking. And the other reason why I think it's harder is because you have fewer levers to adjust. The signing bonus, obviously, that will only happen when you are joining the company, not when you're at the company. And so really now you're reducing the problem space down to two components, salary and equity. And my advice for if you really want to optimize your current compensation is share market data. Talk about, hey, I am really happy here. I want to stick with this team and with this company for the long term. And here's what would really help me do that. The other option is to present another offer altogether. But you have to be careful here about what that will mean for the manager relationship. Because if it comes across that you are purely looking for next best opportunity, something which pays you a little bit more or gives you a better title, then the manager might start to withhold some scope or responsibility from you, and that could limit your future career growth. The other thing is that many companies are going to be careful about what precedent are they setting. Where if I come to you as a manager and say, hey, I want more money, and you give it to me, then that might trigger everyone in the company to go to their manager and ask for more money. Okay, so here are a couple ideas on how to really make a good argument here. One is do some research about, does your company do counteroffers or not? Some companies actually have a policy. Not at all. We're not going to even honor those. We have our own way of giving out increases in salary or equity, and we're not going to even take into account any counteroffer you might get. Other companies will be much more open to it. The other option here is you could talk about the potential of another offer. So if you get an email from a recruiter saying, hey, we want to hire you for this role, here's the salary range, that itself is at least some data to indicate that here's the range which is higher than my current compensation. Can we please get me at least in the range? The other thing is to be really thoughtful about timing. Usually, companies will do a salary adjustment maybe once a year or twice a year, not more than that typically. And so it probably makes sense to time your ask a few weeks or maybe a month or two prior to the next increment, the next change happening, and say, hey, it's really important to me that I feel like I'm taking part in the success that we're creating on this team. In the next adjustment, here's what would be compelling for me. Here's what would really incentivize me to stick around, and make it easy for your manager to tie it into an existing compensation adjustment. And then the argument itself has to be based off of data. Quantify your impact. Talk about how the company is doing really well, how you're doing really well, and how the combination of you sticking around at the company and the additional compensation will lead to a lot more success. So this idea of counteroffers, Meta is actually fairly well known that they have a very formulaic way of giving out bonuses and equity refresh grants. And I have not heard of anyone who has successfully shown a counteroffer to their manager and gotten more money or equity out of it. On the other hand, Google is notorious for actually doing a ton of counteroffers, especially if they want to prevent a talented engineer from going to a competitive company. They're willing to throw millions of dollars in compensation at that engineer. This happens today with OpenAI. There's a famous story of a Google engineer getting paid $10 million to prevent them from going to OpenAI. Or back in the day, it was with Facebook, to prevent them from leaving Google and going to Facebook. Google would pay out insane amounts of money. And so have some awareness of what the precedent is talk to your coworkers, talk to friends, talk to people in the community to figure out where you might be able to see movement, if at all.